So, nearly 2 years later, I've gone back and watched not only 3-Rai and Oath Under Snow, but also Prisma Phantasm. And just for good measure, I managed to track down all the other OVA specials that I couldn't find before, and I've caught up with the entire 3-Rai arc of the manga, or at least everything I can find that was translated. As with the making of this video, the latest chapter that I can find that's been translated is 3-Rai Chapter 62. So, what's my opinion of Pryllia now? It hasn't changed in the slightest. Well, let me rephrase that. My opinion of the anime has changed only slightly. I still maintain that on the whole, this is the second worst anime I've watched at length. In between my Oath Under Snow review and now, I watched Fate Extra Last Encore. From a subject matter standpoint, Pryllia is still worse, but as far as being a coherently watchable anime and in terms of production quality, Pryllia is way better than Last Encore. Kinda makes me sad that two Fate works are currently the worst anime series I've sunk a decent amount of time into. I'm sure worse exist, but I either haven't watched them yet, or I know to avoid them like the plague. However, I do have some new input, not just my opinions on the 3-Rai anime and movie, but also a new perspective on some of the other elements of the rest of the series. However, just because I've caught up with the manga does not mean that I'm going to be spoiling everything major that has not been animated yet, or that I've not previously discussed. So with that said, let's get right into it. So I should start by clarifying something that I misunderstood until after I made the 3-Rai and Oath Under Snow reviews. Apparently, when fans of Pryllia tell me that it gets good with 3-Rai, it seems that they mean the manga arc 3-Rai and not the anime season of the same title. The fourth season of the anime only covers the first third of this arc. The second is covered by Oath Under Snow, and the last third I can only assume is going to be covered in the upcoming movie, called Anonymous Girl, if Google Translate doesn't fail me. So far with the anime, I will say that it's starting to get better with 3-Rai, at least from a plot and storytelling standpoint, and it got good with Oath Under Snow, and we'll have to see where it goes in the next movie. Another thing I didn't learn until I read the 3-Rai manga was that a lot of the problems I have with Pryllia are mostly due to how they chose to adapt the manga into an anime. It turns out that 2-Vai Hers, the third season, which is like 50% filler, was rearranged during adaptation. There was no 2-Vai Hers arc of the manga. The entire 2-Vai arc was all of the plot relevant points from Season 2, 3, and part of the first episode from Season 4. So I guess to pad out the anime to give the manga time to get ahead or to meet this season's production deadline, some of the episodes of Season 3 are based on short mini-chapters that came during different points in the manga. Example, the episode where Mimi discovers Yaoi, these are all shorts from the 3-Rai manga, but they are included as small cutaways that don't overly distract from the ongoing plot. Several mangas do this, giving us small little stories at the end of the volume, either for world build, some comedy, or maybe insight into the writer's thought process. A few examples I can think of that do this are Hellsing, Mega Man NT Warrior, Gundam Seed Astray, and even Solar Boy Django. So while I still don't like what's written, I can say that how it was included in the manga wasn't nearly as distracting as how it was included in the anime, because it completely derailed the plot of the third season. Moving on, I complained about the whole Illya bear part of 3-Rai, how in the anime they just presented it as Illya being too airheaded to obey the laws of physics. However, in the manga, they do mention that she is using magic. It's still silly and absurd, but now it's a little more believable. That's all I really wanted. Just say, it's magic, and we're good. Otherwise it just comes across as sloppy. Additionally, the way Illya's decapitated head grabs Sapphire and fires a shot comes across completely differently in the manga because it's just still frames, and we don't see much movement. While I still think it's stupid, it's easier to buy here because Sapphire's wand looks like it's closer to Illya's head instead of Illya changing trajectory mid-freefall. So what we get here is simply another case of the manga did it better. Sometimes because of better writing, or sometimes because the visuals just look better as still images than they did in full motion. Is it a nitpick, or is it a JoJo reference? To clarify one comment that I made during the main review, I said that Shiro fighting to save his sister was easier for me to get behind than him fighting to save his significant other. I am in no way trying to devalue romantic relationships when compared to siblings and families. What I meant is that it was easier for me personally to get invested in this Shiro's quest than it was for me to get invested in Shiro's missions from Heavensfield, given that in both cases, Shiro is giving up his dream of becoming a hero of justice that saves the world in order to become a hero who saves one very special person. Going a bit deeper, Miyu vs. Shiro doing this is kind of reflective of Kiritsugu's dream sequence inside the Holy Grail from Fate Zero, where, when he was forced to pick between Maya or Illya and Irie, he chose the established family over the potential love interest. On the surface, it looks like he's choosing Irie, but if you think about it, at the very start, Kiritsugu knew that Irie was not going to survive this Grail War, so he's really just choosing Illya, his child, over his future lover, Maya. In the same way, I see these different storylines as Shiro choosing his sister over choosing his potential love interest. Given the development of both versions of Shiro, it seems like a more worthy cause to me personally, as Miyu and her Shiro had a much longer history than Sakura and the original Shiro do in their own respective universes. Also, Sakura is accidentally causing the deaths of countless people, while Miyu is completely innocent and only helps people. A big brother on a mission to save his little sister who's being hunted for her powers, as opposed to a horny teenager with a hero complex nearly getting himself killed to rescue his friend so he can continue to get laid. Is that a gross oversimplification? Well, yeah, but that's just my personal take on things. So again, when it comes to Shiro being forced to not save everybody, but to save one person, I find it easier to cheer for Miyu versus Shiro. However, feel free to take this with a grain of salt, as I've only been exposed to the animated adaptation versions of Sakura and haven't finished reading the Heavensfield route yet, so I'm likely working with incomplete data, and these judgments are based on the versions that I have seen. That said, I sincerely pray to God that I am never put in a situation where I have to choose between my sisters and my wife. I don't wish that on anybody. A few other notes made in my reviews that were answered in the manga or that need clearing up. How did Angelica's card cross over to the other side before she did at the beginning of Season 4? In the anime, they haven't shown it yet, but in the manga, after she destroys Shiro's reality marble with Aya, she makes note that everything related to the Holy Grail War has vanished, dragged to the other side with Miyu, and her install form is gone, implying that her card went with it. I said that Illya suddenly having the assassin card was a plot hole. That was kind of just an assumption that I didn't give critical thought to. I forgot that whenever Miyu or Illya does a trance, the class card pouch is stored inside their transformation, so it's likely that Sapphire simply had it stored inside her until Illya activated the trance. Again, I wish they'd just given us one line of dialogue in the anime or the manga, simply have Sapphire say, "Good thing I still had the assassin card on me," or something like that. But again, one plot hole that hasn't been patched up yet is why Gilgamesh can access both his and Angelica's gates of Babylon. If he had access to it the entire time, then why didn't he just unleash all the swords at once or draw out Aya to overpower the Ainsworths effortlessly? Either Gilgamesh is lazy, or they just needed a magic MacGuffin to solve the problem with dramatic timing. I preemptively gave away the identity of the berserker that Beatrice was using. There was a reason for this though. I commented that I thought that she was actually using Iskandar's card based on the circumstantial evidence of having a slightly similar motif, with the red hair and furred cape. I was going to clarify this in part 1 of my 3-Rai review, but unfortunately the audio at that part of the recording was glitchy and unsuitable for the rest of the review. I didn't realize that this is actually a plot point later on, and I looked into it just to satisfy my own curiosity, to decide whether or not I wanted to continue after Season 3 or not, because initially I had decided to call it quits, but I would have returned much sooner if the mystery install was actually Iskandar. When Illya used Rule Breaker on Darius, I simply explained that the dagger destroys all magic. That is true, but I wasn't specific enough. Rulebreaker has the ability to destroy all magic contracts, as seen in the Fate visual novel, where it is used on more than one occasion to sever a pact between a mage and a servant. This is why it disrupted Darius' connection to Julian, even if only temporarily, at least as far as I could tell. It could be a contract of sorts, or it could be because of a different cause. Spoiler warning, skip ahead to this part of the video if you don't want part of the plot of the next manga arc to be spoiled for you. It turns out that Darius has placed a curse upon the Ainsworths to where his own existence will eventually overwrite the current head of the family. So, Rulebreaker temporarily disrupted his connection to Julian. It could be considered a contract, I suppose. A forced one, but a contract nonetheless. Or the dagger just destroyed the magic connection. A few other smaller instances were slightly different or more well fleshed out in the manga. When Tanaka takes the Mjolnir blast for Illya, in the manga version she has a few lines of dialogue that didn't make it into the anime. Also, Shiro's battle with Saber was more well demonstrated in the original. Any fan of Fate will remember that Excalibur can't be used single-handedly, and we see that by the Saber doll doing so, he breaks his own arm in the process. But that doesn't explain how Shiro survived the blast based on the animation we're given. But in the manga, we're shown that because of the single-handed swing, Shiro was able to narrowly sidestep the sacred sword and land the finishing strike. Another complaint I had from the previous editorial video was that Rin and Luvia were crushing on Shiro without any proper development. Small spoiler, but ultimately unimportant to the grand scheme of things, is that Rin and Luvia actually did go to school with Shiro, and so did Sakura, even in the Illyaverse. This is revealed in the later half of the 3-Rai manga arc. Whether or not it'll be mentioned in the anime adaptations, we'll have to wait to find out. So this makes my opinion of that aspect of the show a tiny bit improved. Moving on to my views of the rest of the series now, I will say that watching and reading 3-Rai has both enhanced and degraded my opinion of the rest of the series. From my personal perspective, it feels that once they reached 3-Rai, they decided that the world build wasn't satisfactory, so they leave it all behind, including every established side character, and jump into a new world in something of a soft reboot. Kinda like how they restarted the live-action Transformers series with Bumblebee. I get that that's a separate continuity now, but the original plan was for it to be a prequel reboot thing. Tiny spoiler, but as of the current manga, they have not returned to Illya's world yet. But I know this isn't a reboot because everything that happened up until now is still canon, but it's a little bit jarring when you simply throw away all the established world build from the past 2 arcs. However, since I didn't particularly care for Illya's universe, I'm not going to complain that much about the story direction. I will say that the fanfiction vibes are stronger than ever though. As I mentioned in the full review, the inclusion of several moments mirroring the mainline Fate series made it seem like throwbacks that were included to distract the viewers from the work's shortcomings, or because they couldn't come up with their own ideas. We get even more of that in the next story arc. Not going to spoil what it is, but with the scanlations I found online, there was an editor's note that called this chapter Fate Kaleid Liner Heaven's Feel. But just because it feels like a fanfiction, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I enjoy fanfiction and have even written a few of my own. I do like it when we get to explore concepts from worlds that are just glossed over in the mainline works. Side note, one of the reasons that I love the Mega Man Battle Network series so much is because the world build is so expansive that it leaves a lot of room for fan creation, and that's where my very own channel mascot came from. So I'm not opposed to fanfictions at all, but I prefer the quality of writing to not give me flashbacks to my immortal. I've been trying to find the words to explain why I have a problem with Pryllia's fanfiction vibe, and I think I finally found them. I feel that it relies too heavily on the throwbacks to the main series, because it wasn't able to carry its own story well enough when it wasn't borrowing elements from the other works. This can be seen in the first 3 seasons, as the only time I felt invested were during the battle sequences, because whenever they gave the Illyaverse characters free time to talk, I never liked what I heard. I grew to despise all of the characters from the Illyaverse except for August, Sapphire, and Bizette, because every character was either unreasonably stupid or just plain deplorable. I do think that Kuro's whole character arc prior to joining Illya's team was very well written, everything from her creation to her reason for wanting to kill Illya. But the times the action and writing was at their best was when they were focused on the Miuverse. The Ainsworths are new characters to the Fate franchise, and I love their setup and backstory. And, as I said before, this is the best version of Shiro ever. And at the same time they introduced him, we get several references to the original VN. Additionally, they had to severely handicap him not only by taking away his card and turning it into Kuro so that he can never use it again, but also by making it to where he can never use Unlimited Blade Works again. Having watched O Thunder Snow before 3-Rai, it felt like a slap in the face. They give us this amazing idea, let us have it for one brief moment, and then take it away from us. But the same concept gave me a greater appreciation for the Illya vs Saber Alter fight. For those who don't remember, the first time that Illya used the Archer card's install form was in a dire situation. Ruby, Sapphire, Rin, and Luvia were blown away by Saber's Excalibur, and were nowhere to be found, just buried under some rubble. But from Illya and Miyu's perspective, they were completely alone and defenseless against this powerful foe. Illya then goes into a trance-like state, her eyes turning bright red, and she installs the Archer card and has no memory of the fight later. Small headcanon of mine. When Illya used the Archer card here, that was Shiro coming out and using Illya as a vessel to protect his little sister, Miyu. And what more fitting opponent than Archer Shiro's final enemy from the Holy Grail War that he participated in. But, that said, this also raises a concern for me. If the Archer card is Shiro and his will, then that raises some questionable semantics, mostly involving Kuro. Kuro was born from the Archer card, aka Future Shiro, but also from Illya. She takes Illya's form using the attributes of Shiro, but with the soul of Illya's reset older sister from the past. This makes the lowly Yuri elements even worse, because this means that Kuro is somehow the freaky love child of Illya and Shiro, while at the same time being Illya's sister. I guess Ruby kinda sorta got her Illya-Shiro ship after all? Of course, I could just be overanalyzing things. It's kinda like remembering that in The Lion King, Mufasa and Scar are the only 2 male lions in the pride that are old enough to breed. So if that's true, then what does that make Nala and Simba? Now that I've scarred your childhood, let's move on. For this next part, I'm just going to gush over the Miuverse for a little bit. O Thunder Snow and the 3-Rai anime more specifically. In a weird way, I feel like I got my wish from the previous Pryllia rant video. I said that there was way too much filler and poor content, so each of the first 3 seasons should be shortened down and turned into movies, so that we get a very clean cut and dry experience with only the best that the show has to offer. O Thunder Snow did exactly that, especially if you compare it to its manga counterpart. In the manga, this story arc is presented as Shiro telling the story to Illya's group after the battle with the Ainsworths, which is where the 3-Rai anime leaves off. However, the movie doesn't feature Illya's team except for at the very end, showing us how Miyu met up with them after leaving her world behind. Instead of it being told as a flashback, we experience the movie as a prequel in real time, more or less. We get great writing, great action scenes, new characters, and all of what was great about Pryllia with none of the garbage that makes it awful. It's even fun to watch just as a standalone work, and this is made easier by them omitting the flashback element from the manga. The 3-Rai arc of the manga was also pretty good. As stated previously, I watched O Thunder Snow before watching 3-Rai, and after seeing what Shiro went through, I decided that I wanted to see this through to the end. I love the Ainsworths. I love their setup, I love their motives, I love their designs and abilities. The only thing I don't really like is how, at times, Erika acts too much like a little kid, if you catch my drift. This is also made even more annoying by a spoiler from the next arc that I won't reveal yet. Beatrice is about half and half. I like how she's kind of the antithesis to Bizette. Both are insanely strong, but while Bizette is well composed, Beatrice is like a wild beast. But she does act a bit too horny for my tastes. It only gets worse in Prisma Phantasm. But all in all, I much prefer the Miuverse cast to the Illyaverse one, especially Kirei. Kirei is probably the best part of 3-Rai. And, tiny spoiler, we've seen just about all we will see of him in this arc. As far as I remember, he does not return for the last leg of 3-Rai, so no more ramen shop shenanigans. But we have Prisma Phantasm for that. Another thing that I really love is the imagery from Heaven's Field that's used for Miuverse Shiro. Every time he uses projection without his card, it does damage to his body, and he uses his left arm to activate Unlimited Blade Works, which is a reference to how he had Archer's arm grafted on him after losing his own arm, and he used the replacement arm to call upon Archer's powers. Archer's power is too much for him to handle, so it's slowly tearing his body apart. Additionally, it's kind of a nice touch how his skin is slowly darkening and his hair is turning white, making him look more like Archer. Even though Shiro said that his existence is slowly being replaced by Archer, I don't think that he's actually turning into Archer, but I love the imagery that's used here. I think this is my favorite version of Sakura as well. Going by how she's depicted in the rest of the anime adaptations of Fate, she's just kind of bland. I get the reason why, being that Fate is basically a glorified dating sim from 2004, so most of the characters are based on archetypes, but I feel like O Thunder Snow's version expanded upon her character in a way that complements the spirit of the original, while simultaneously being an improvement. When she offers the Archer card to Shiro so that he can save his little sister, in a way, she was wishing that someone would do the same for her, since she's a younger sister from an extremely abusive family. She wants Shinji to be the same kind of brother that Shiro is, willing to go to the ends of the earth to save his sister. Since she can't have that reality for herself, she's willing to give up her shot at the Grail so that Shiro can have his happy ending, and she was also willing to stand up to Shinji of her own accord and fight him to the death without being controlled by the Grail's shadow. That moment alone made me respect this version of Sakura a lot more than the mainline series version. One thing that completely caught me off guard was Berserker Sakura. Again, I watched O Thunder Snow before 3-Rai, so watching her die at the tentacly hand of Shinji only to be revived as this just shocked me to my core. I think this is made even stronger by watching the movie first. Going in as blind as possible, then watching the events play out and then getting blindsided by Sakura lot showing up was a wonderful twist that I still greatly appreciate. Fate Grand Order cameo when? Fortunately, she does return, and I can't wait to see her next outing in the sequel movie. However, I do have some complaints about O Thunder Snow, mostly about the setup and world build. My biggest question is, why did there need to be a Holy Grail war? I know that in the main Fate universe, the Holy Grail only manifests itself if a certain amount of servants are killed. But in Pryllia, the Ainsworth family holds all the cards. Quite literally. I can understand if the Grail needed blood sacrifices to bring it out, but if that's the case, then why didn't they just use 7 dolls with fake personalities, like the ones they put into Rin and Luvia? They already were using dolls to do battle, and the only unforeseen variable was Shiro's Archer card manifesting. They set Sakura up for failure by giving her a fake card, so they had no way of planning on Shiro becoming such a problem. But if they wanted to be smart about it, just use dummy dolls with servant cards, kill them one by one, and boom, Holy Grail. I consulted some of my friends who are more well versed in the deeper Fate lore than I am, and when I proposed this question, both from a Pryllia and normal universe standpoint, they suggested that if the situation became extremely unbalanced and the ritual was not carried out properly, then the Grail could act of its own volition, and we might actually end up with an Apocrypha-style resummoning where we get 14 servants, or a scenario similar to Fate's Strange Fake. However, because of all the variables, too many semantics, and at this point I just want to enjoy what Pryllia has done right, I'll simply have to accept the author's take on continuity. Pryllia is a spin-off made up of different rules. If something seems out of place, just don't question it. I really hate to accept this reality, but to keep all the cool stuff that has crawled up out of the depths of this endless abyss of talent waste, this time I'll allow it. At the end of the day, I still don't really like the Prisma Illya anime as a whole because of how a lot of it was adapted with the large amounts of useless filler and terrible writing. The manga handled it a bit better, and I will say that the anime is improving, but at the moment I can't say that on the whole the anime is good. I still wouldn't recommend it to anyone trying to get into Fate or to any friends who might be curious. At least not the entirety of it. I can definitely recommend watching O Thunder Snow and looking up the fight scenes on their own though. So from here, we just have to hope that they keep going strong and pray for a brighter future for this work. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see my reviews on the Pryllia anime up to this point, or my previous editorial video on the series as a whole, then click the links on the screen or check the description below.